kick it in the head when he was 25. Speed jive, don't wanna stay alive.
Once again, Lauren Southern gets some nasty liquid thrown at her by radical leftist thugs, while she tries to do journalistic work and cover their behavior. This time it was Antifa. I would like to take the opportunity to commend Lauren for her bravery, her undaunted willingness to go through fire and storm and golden showers to get us some valuable images and information. I would also like to talk a little bit about journalism in the age of the internet. Those of you who have been watching me for a while know that I have a unique perspective on art. While most art critics tend to differentiate between high art and popular art, I claim that the popular art of today is the high art of tomorrow, meaning that most of the masterpieces were created in popular mediums, were considered popular entertainment at the time, and only later were elevated to the status of masterpieces and started to be regarded as high art. And the same process happens to the medium itself. In time, it is elevated to the level of high art, until eventually it is no longer a popular medium, and at this point it no longer produces masterpieces, and no longer has an effect on culture. But I don't think that I ever fully explained what I mean by popular medium, so I'm going to attempt to define it now. When I talk about a popular medium, I mean a medium that people go to for entertainment. By entertainment, I mean a cultural artifact that makes you forget yourself for a while, as you are immersed in it. But when it's over, you return to yourself unchanged. Some cultural artifacts, however, have a deeper effect. After you experience them, they leave a lasting mark on you. Those are what I define as art. When I talk of a popular medium, I don't mean a medium in which all the artifacts are entertainment. What characterizes a popular medium is that it has an exchange of ideas between its entertaining side and its artistic side, so the consumers who come for entertainment are also exposed to the art. Let's take YouTube as an example for a contemporary popular medium. On my channel, I try to give you something deeper than just entertainment, and some of my viewers told me that my videos have left a mark on them. But I'm still always aware that I'm on a popular medium, and to compete I have to try to be entertaining. I use the language of the medium, the language that was developed by its entertainers. A channel like mine can never hope to compete against a pure entertainer like PewDiePie. I know PewDiePie has lately become more political, but let's pretend that he was still doing what he did back in 2012. That's very different content from mine. However, a kid who starts to watch and enjoy PewDiePie will naturally seek other channels of gamer comedians, and in the process he might find channels that combine gaming with political and social commentary, like Total Biscuit, JonTron, Angry Joe, or Boogie2988. If he finds it interesting, he will dig more, and eventually get to Gamergate channels, like Sargon of Akkad. And if he's watching Sargon and gets affected by his views, he might then look for similar channels, and get to me. And so, 2 weeks after starting to watch PewDiePie, that kid might start watching my little channel, despite it being so different from PewDiePie's. Similarly, a small channel like mine can create a meme, be it an idea, an image, a new type of content, a new style of making vids, and this meme can be picked up by the bigger channels that are watching me, then by the bigger channels that are watching them, and all the way up to PewDiePie, where it will be watched by millions. And this is the power of a popular medium. Its center is connected to its fringes, its light side is connected to its serious side, its entertaining side is connected to its arty side. Because of that, it can have a mass effect on culture, as people are consuming new and deep ideas in the guise of entertainment. Eventually, the medium is recognized for its power, and then its image begins to transition from a popular medium into a serious medium. In the process, its deeper creations, those that were considered mere fluff by virtue of being created on a popular medium, now gain recognition as works of art, and even as masterpieces. Eventually, the transition is completed, and the medium loses connection to the world of entertainment, and starts to regard itself as a serious medium. When this happens, it no longer has an effect on society. Take classical music, for instance. In the 18th century, it was considered a popular medium. Then, in the beginning of the 19th century, it started to be taken more seriously, and composers like Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven were elevated from the status of popular entertainers to the status of respected artists. But there was still connection between the arty side and the entertaining side, and this held up until the middle of the 20th century, when movie soundtracks were still inspired by artistic innovations made in the medium. After that, however, it completely lost touch with the world of entertainment, and as a result it has almost no effect on our culture. There are still good composers working in the medium, but they will never be remembered to be as great as the composers of the past. When a medium is a popular medium, when it has that cultural power, it is also a major source of information. Consider what happened after the invention of print in the 15th century. Until then, the church and the monarchy held a grip on knowledge, and shared only the information they wanted to share with the public. The new invention allowed common people to print pamphlets in which they shared subversive information and ideas. By the 17th century, it solidified and became the newspaper, a medium that could contain information, news, ideas, criticism, satire, and more, in either words or pictures. Through this medium, the ideas of enlightenment could spread, and 18th century philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Mendelssohn, and Kant wrote articles in newspapers, articles that today are considered to be cornerstones of modern philosophy. Meanwhile, newspapers also played host to another popular form of entertainment, namely literature. Many books, back then, were published as a series, like today's television series, except that it was done in newspapers, as a new chapter would be published periodically. Later on, in the beginning of the 20th century, when literature came to be considered a serious art form, some of these serialized books were elevated to the status of masterpieces. Examples include Oliver Twist, Around the World in 80 Days, Father Goriot, War and Peace, and many others. So the medium of a printed newspaper was basically a combination of journalism, philosophy, and art, and the three were intertwined. During the 19th century, however, journalism became corporatized and established in the form we know it today, with a big staff, international publication networks, ethical rules, and so forth. Literature, meanwhile, also started to take itself more seriously, and confined itself to books, as did philosophy. In the 20th century, the newspaper medium no longer contained philosophy and art, but was only about journalism. In the beginning of the 20th century, movies became the most prominent popular form, and cinemas became a place where people would hang out. Back then, cinemas offered a lot more than just a feature film. Moviegoers would watch newsreels, documentaries, serial short films, and cartoons before the main Hollywood feature came on, and after it they could stay for the second feature, the low-budget B-movie made by independent creators. Once again, then, the popular medium provided a mix of information, art, and entertainment. This era ended as television became a part of every household in the middle of the century, and incorporated all these ingredients, leaving cinemas to show only the feature film. From that point, television was the popular medium that was also responsible for information. With its ability to show events live as they were happening, it became the leading news media, and turned the world into a global village. Print media survived this process, because the type of journalism offered by newspapers and by television was different enough for both of them to coexist. But when the internet came along, suddenly people could get news faster than these mediums could provide it, and both of them had to find a way to compete. With sales and viewership declining, the old publications joined the internet world, but that was to their own detriment.
At the dawn of the internet, we started seeing a huge diversification of how media works. News organizations used to be very few, and they needed to be moderate because if they pushed too far in one direction, they would risk losing a large portion of their market share. So they tried very hard to be balanced. When the internet then started, people had the choice to read a story from any of the tens of thousands and today probably millions of websites that will push a narrative. And because people are looking for news that they're interested in, and they're also more likely to click a story that fills their bias, they're going to read partisan news, unfortunately.
This is Tim Poole, who worked for several news media organizations before he decided to quit and become an independent journalist. In this video, which I will link to below, he details how the old ways of doing journalism were corrupted by the nature of the internet. In order to survive financially, he says, news outlets have no choice but to become partisan, agenda-driven, and dishonest. They are no longer about investigative journalism that aims to expose the truth, but about giving the audience what they want to hear. They pretend to be serious media, but what they are providing is actually entertainment.
There's a huge problem. With all of the new blogs, alternative media websites, and the rise of digital media, news companies can't afford to hire real journalists anymore, and they can't afford to pay expensive salaries. Let's look at the logic of what would happen if you went to an investor and said, I've got a proposal for you. I want to hire 2 researchers at $70,000 per year. I need a budget of $200,000 for video production and a staff to produce a documentary. And we're going to investigate this corporation and this government official. The investor is going to look at you and say, how long will this take? You respond, maybe 1 year. The investor will then say, what do I get after 1 year? Well, journalists can't guarantee a story. That's not what journalism does. They can promise to investigate, they can promise to spend the money, but there's no guarantee that the product after 1 year will be valuable. Most investors are going to look you in the face and say, no, I'd rather just put it in the bank and collect a small interest rate. But what happens when someone goes to an investor and says, I'm going to do a story, I need $5,000. The investor says, what do I get after a year? The person responds, I'll tell you what, after 3 days, I'll say whatever you want me to say. We'll produce a video and just say it's true. How about that? This is one of the big problems we're seeing in news. It is not economically feasible for people to invest in real reporting. So we're looking at subscriber models, we're looking at pay what you will, and we're looking at nonprofits to carry out real reporting. In fact, some of the largest news organizations have totally dissolved their investigative news teams over the past few years. Many others are outsourcing this.
And so, the old models of journalism have gone to the dogs. To save journalism, it is up to the new popular medium to step up and invent new types of info sharing. And with the rise of the social networks, these new types started to emerge. First time I felt it was in 2011, during the Arab Spring. Up until then, in the Arab countries, the dictators and the imams controlled the information given to the public, and the media outlets were doing their bidding. But the social networks were something that they could not control, and the Arab Spring activists used them to share new seditious ideas, debunk the lies of the authorities, inform the world of what was going on, and assure each other that they are not alone. They also used them to converse with people from all over the world, and open up to other ways of thinking. And this is where I could come in. I was one of the people who got involved in the Arab Spring, talking to the activists on Twitter and Facebook and helping them to get their plight known. In the process, I've realized that things have changed. We are no longer living in a global village. The social networks have turned us into a global ant colony, where numerous transmissions are being spread in every direction at any given moment, and every one of us passes information to everyone else. Information and news are no longer a top-down thing. We are no longer just the consumers of news, but also the broadcasters, and, in some cases, the people who are making the events that become news. This is an entirely new model of journalism. The Arab Spring is considered by many people to have been a disaster, which brought the rise of Islamism and jihadism. That is not at all how it looks from where I'm sitting. For many decades, the Arab world was ruled by dictators, who did everything to oppress liberal voices, while allowing Islamism to grow. They did it because they knew that the West is afraid of the Islamists, and will support them as long as they are seen as the only alternative. But the growth of Islamism made the future look terrifying. Before 2011, it seemed like the Islamists will eventually become strong enough to overthrow the hated dictators, and will be regarded as heroes in the Arab world, allowing them to establish their rule. The Arab Spring, that was led by liberal forces, completely reshuffled the deck. Now, the Islamists are regarded as villains who have dashed the hopes of 2011, whereas the more liberal forces are finally getting their say. Instead of leading the Arab world to jihad against the West, the Islamists are now mainly fighting against other Muslims. They are still the strongest force, because of all those decades they were allowed to grow. But the real story of the last 6 years is the rise of other voices, religious reformers, democracy activists, ex-Muslims and more. They are gaining popularity, and they are doing so mainly through the social networks. I compared the social networks to an ant colony, but maybe I should have said termites, slowly eating at the foundation of old structures and eventually bringing them down. In the beginning of the decade, the termites were mainly operating on the Arab world, but in the last 3 years the focus was on another oppressive structure that had to be brought down. For decades, the radical left in the West has been building slowly, just like the Islamists in the Arab world. They took over parts of the academia, the media and human rights organizations, and managed to legitimize their radical discourse in the guise of liberal discourse, creating what we now know as the regressive left. Most liberals remained unaware of the change, and became passive regressives, not realizing that they are defending anti-liberal values. Thus, the regressive left took control over the formerly liberal media outlets and became powerful enough to be able to silence those who disagree with them. But they didn't pay attention to the social networks until it was too late, and now the termites are eating at the foundations of all they built. They did manage to assert some control over Twitter and Facebook, but YouTube is messing up their works. When I started regularly watching YouTube, back in 2009, I realized that on any subject that interests me, there will probably be someone doing a specific news channel. It offered me a new way of consuming news, a buffet that allowed me to choose the issues I wanted to be informed about, and in a much more in-depth way than what the old media had to offer. And when came the time to provide alternative news to the regressive media, YouTube was revealed in all its power. A while ago, Sargon of Akkad referred to himself in passing as a news outlet. This statement received immediate derision from the usual sticklers, but that just shows that they didn't adjust to the new times. Of course Sargon is a news outlet. For years now, he has been my main source of news about regressive left shenanigans. Once he established himself in that role, he has people from all over the world sending him information, so you can be sure that he misses very little. At first he was mainly just raging at it, but in time he has learned a lot about the ideological and practical mechanisms that churn out all this regressive stupidity, and can provide a deeper analysis. Combining that with information that he collects from independent journalists like Tim Pool, he does some serious investigative work on issues that old media rarely covers. So he may not be a news outlet in the traditional sense of a newspaper that covers a large range of topics, but if you want to know about this one specific topic of the regressive left, he is the best. And YouTube has other channels of this sort, serving as valuable sources of information and alternative media. But, of course, one must never forget that this is gonzo journalism. All of these channels are agenda-driven, so you must not rely on them to get the truth. It is on us, the consumers, to make sure that we get information from all sides, if we want to get a reliable picture. Recently, Dave Rubin made a video titled "Who Do You Trust?", in which he discussed the shambolic state of today's media, and the breakdown of trust we once had in the old news outlets. He points out the dangers of this situation, and he is right, but there is another side to it. Media was actually never reliable, and there is also something healthy in the distrust we have towards it now. But it is true that having no one to trust is overall an unhealthy state. So, let me answer the question that Rubin poses.
So now let me kick the question back to you. Who do you trust in the media? I'm guessing it's a pretty short list, though if you've got some good names, I'd love to hear them in the comment section right down below.
The answer is, I trust my network. Over the years, I've built a network of sources on YouTube and Twitter, information providers who I find to be generally honest and reliable. If you build a diverse network of such news sources, which bring you the stories from different and opposing points of view, you'll be much more well informed than if you read a newspaper. There is one problem with this approach though. If you build your network only around outlets of specific news, it caters to your own taste, which means that you might miss important news that happens in other areas. The old media, that provided a mix of articles on a wide variety of subjects, was preferable in this regard. You need at least one source of general news to fill in the gaps. And when Rubin asked if there is anyone in the media I trust, I immediately thought that yes, there actually is someone. Of all the general news outlets out there, there is just one that has earned my complete trust. Dave asked to name them in the comments below, but I had a feeling that I wouldn't have to. I scrolled down to the comment section, and, as I expected, it was the top comment. Yeah, I trust Defranco. I've been watching Philip Defranco on a daily basis since 2010, and never once felt that he was being dishonest with me. Phil proves that it is possible to be trustworthy, informative and fair, while still being entertaining, compassionate and thought-provoking. His method seems to be the same as I've described, building a large network of sources that inform you on what's going on, and listening to all sides to try to get to the bottom of the story. When he fills you in, he does his best to differentiate between facts, opinions, speculations and bullshit, and use common sense instead of ideology. He is vastly superior to any of the old media outlets, a model for how journalism should work in this day and age. The moment I realized that Phil was the man came in 2011, after the earthquake and tsunami that hit Japan. While the old media outlets reporting on it was a disgusting display of sensationalism and hysteria, Defranco's video was a masterclass on how you should report such a tragedy. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you take 4 minutes of your life to watch. He has only improved since then, and lately he announced his plan to expand and support others who will do what he does. Can he save journalism? If anyone can do it, it's Phil. But maybe it's time we realize that all journalism is dead and replaced by a new type of journalism. The new journalism is us, every individual on the social networks. We constitute one great mind, in which everyone is a neuron, an intersection receiving many pieces of information from many sources, and passing them on to many other neurons. We may not have investigative journalists digging and uncovering secrets, but we have individuals in key places sharing secrets through media channels like WikiLeaks, and that is just as good. So while everybody is complaining about how misinformed people are in the era of fake news, I put it to you that people have always been misinformed and always believed in nonsense. And what characterizes our era is actually that the ignorance gets debunked faster than it did in the past. As a whole, we are actually more informed than ever before. So, instead of bitching about the state of all journalism, let's focus on making new journalism better. And that means that we have to develop our own journalistic ethics. This new state of things gives every one of us power to affect how people think, and with power comes responsibility. When a new story gets to you, take a moment to fact check, to make sure that it is accurate, to make sure that it is fair, and to make sure that it reaches the people who need to know it. In short, be like Phil. You are now the one who is making the news. Make it good.